People, Real Matters. This is Diana Tulchinsky with my guests, Mark Palmeri and Moritz Kellerman. Mark and Moritz, can you tell me what was the social impact that helped you become artists?
Art has been with me my entire life. I started drawing before the age of 5, and it was very, very organic, very intuitive. It was just developed all by itself. And since then, I just kept doing it. And by the age of 8, I was starting to ask my mother that I wanted to paint in oils.
Wow, that's really young, like at 8.
Yeah, I know. And she didn't want to.
No, she wanted you to become a professional.
No, it was not that. The problem was that I suffer from asthma.
Oh.
And she was afraid that the oil and the mineral spirits and all of that would trigger some attack, and she asked a few of the doctors, and they said, "Oh no, just let him do it. Just not gonna do anything. Let him do it." But she wouldn't, until one day I built up enough courage to say to her, "I'm already doing it." And she said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, at the neighbor's house." And when she heard that, then she said, "Okay, let's go and buy you some supplies." And from there on, she sponsored everything. She would have the carpenter of the store, built me stretchers and paint and prime them, and I go to a store and buy some paint, and that
Interesting.
was, yeah.
Interesting. So you had to stretch the canvas and then by hand?
No, the carpenter
The
did.
carpenter
Yeah,
did,
yeah,
yes.
and she would order like 20 at a time or something like
Oh,
that.
wow.
Oh yeah, it was very prolific.
Where were you growing up?
I was growing up in Central America at the
Oh,
time.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And Mark, what was your impact saying that you want to become an artist?
I just saw, excuse me, I just saw the artwork in different places. And I'd always ask, I'd say, who made that? And it was in someone's house. They'd always like, well, no one made it, because it was like something they bought or whatever to hang over their couch. My dad drew sometimes and painted it sometimes. I just wanted to do it, So I had my own way of getting my hands on materials and making the things I wanted to make. So like in the current show that we're in at the Korean Cultural Center with Moritz, Kellerman, and myself, the recent works in futurist primitives, I always was just making things. Like I wasn't necessarily drawing. My family was in the tape business, and my dad would get samples of different types of tape, and he'd bring it home, and it would be sitting there. So I'd build stuff out of it and build stuff out of boxes. And so I was really doing sculptures first, but I also like visual imagery. And, this culture, United States, since I've been around, there's not an emphasis on the arts and education, especially in public schools. And we weren't anybody special either, we just took whatever we can get. So it was a long time before I learned you could buy art materials, like at an art store. I think I was already in college. I'm not kidding. Some a little bit in high school. But I thought, the art that I related to was more like what you'd call like naive outsider art of that type. So I'd make things in my room that hung down from the ceiling. I didn't know they were mobiles. Or I would cut clothing and like make shapes in the clothing, so when you wear it, you could see through these like different places. Or wear a red shirt over a white shirt that had cuts in it.
Oh,
And my
interesting.
friend,
Distress look.
they're like, what's wrong with them? I didn't know. I was just making stuff. So I got lucky.
And who introduced you to the Art Institute of Chicago? Was it like a high school, or is it a profession, or some kind of family connection?
Well, in my case, it was my own choice. I was down in Corpus Christie, Texas, studying with this mentor professor that was great to me and taught me the language of abstraction. And at the time, my first wife wanted to have a child, and basically I said to her, you know, this is a 2-year program, you know, can you, if you wait, you know, let me get the degree, and et cetera, et cetera. So I applied to more schools than the average student of my professor at the time. And he said to me, well, it's kind of ridiculous that you're doing that. You know, 6 would be enough. And I did twice as much. And so I said, well, out of the 6, you know, how many usually get accepted, you know, your best students? And he'd say, well, if they're lucky, 1. I said, well, I can't take that risk because I already made an agreement with my wife then, and I have to keep my word. So when the time came, there were several offers. I was very fortunate. And I decided to come to the Art Institute for 2 reasons. One, they had a lot to offer, especially the museum, because a world-known museum, and people come from all over the world to see the Art Institute, like they do with like we do with the Louvre. But also, I knew it was a place. Chicago was a place where my first wife could get employment, and that was very important because I was not going to be able to work.
Okay. Yeah, so you made that family commitment.
Yeah, I worked it out both ways, and here I am, 35 years later in Chicago.
Inspiring story. And Mark, like, what brought you to the Art Institute of Chicago?
I was studying psychology and advertising and business and law enforcement because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know you could take art at college. I mean, my family was like a normal family. They thought you got your high school and then you go to work. That's what you do. So after working for 1 year, I'm like, this is brain death. Because I was always reading and inquisitive, and you know, the guys I'd work with would laugh at anything that had anything culturally. You know, I said, oh, you know, last night I had this really like unusual dream, and I'm like, we don't care, okay? We want to talk about our cars, our girlfriend, our sports, or whatever. So then I said, I'm going to go back to school, even though I never wanted to go to school after high school. I just wanted to get out of high school. So I went to Harper College, because that was all I knew, Harper College. And then someone said, why don't you go to Oakton College? It's in your district. It's less tuition. And I'm like, what, Oakton? So I started at Oakton in 1979 or 80 or something. And I was, like I said, I was doing of all things, law enforcement, because I was a civically minded person. I like justice and everything, but I knew that wasn't for me ultimately. I had to do artwork for my other classes, like little things. They said, why don't you take an art class? I said, where? Here, we have art. So I took a class with psychology and art, and my professor was like, your work's really good. You know, why don't you take my drawing class? So I took a drawing, then took this. I kept taking more stuff, and including a lot of photography, sculpture, and everything. And that's how I heard about the Art Institute. You know, they were saying, you should go to the Art Institute. I didn't even know what it was. I'd never been there to the museum.
No,
so,
you're never exposed to
No,
that, like,
we were in a
classical
cultural
arts.
family. I mean, we're just straightforward, regular people. So I got an assignment from one of my instructors to go there and do a report on Cubism or whatever, I think Picasso. And I accidentally wandered into the school from the museum. And I'm like, what is this place? You know, and they gave me a tour, and I said, you mean they do art in every room in this whole building? They said, yes. This is being recorded. I'll tell the names. I thought they were making the artwork for the museum. in the school. I mean, that's how naive I was. I swear.
Yeah.
But I mean,
you can get like that.
when I got in, when I did get accepted, I got accepted, and I worked really hard. You know, I loved being there. It was the first place I ever felt like anything normal, you know, about my life. And when I was ready to graduate, they said, I didn't know I was supposed to graduate either.
No,
I just was there all the
Yeah.
time working, doing. They said, you have to graduate. I said, well, when? They said, well, how many credits do you have? And I said, I don't know. So they said, let's get your transcript. My professor's like, you need 3 credits to graduate. And I said, well, then what? He said, well, you should go to apply for graduate school. So I did. I applied. I got in. It was a scholarship thing for me. Because some people were saying to me, you know, you hated school. Now you want to go to school forever.
Yeah.
You know. So I got graduate school, and it was a little more dry than the general population of the undergrad. But I worked really hard, and I loved it. And that's how I got opportunities to teach.
Oh, nice. And how long were you teaching there in the Art Institute of
I taught there
Chicago?
for 9 years in the continuing studies program.
Can you expand upon that? Like, what is continuing studies?
Well,
Is that two
continuing
genres?
studies covers a lot of different areas, and at different schools they call it different things. It's non-credit, sometimes it's credit. Somebody needs 3 credits to graduate, or they're coming into the school and they want to have a tryout to see if they're going to make it in the regular courses. So I got students from like all over the world, all kinds of situations. People who just want to take one class, they don't want to be in a degree program. So non-credit is not always non-credit, but that's where I got. There was a man there, his name E.W. Ross, and we're talking about people, and now they're all passed away. He was like one of the best people there.
I worked for him.
Oh, I love the
him
guy.
too.
He was so good. And then I got connected at Oakton. It's kind of at the same time. I went to talk to the chairman because I loved that guy too. He was the best instructor I ever had at Oakton. And he said, you know, I'm the chairman now. I said, really? Congratulations. He said, why don't you teach a class here? I was so nervous though. I really was. I was like, what if someone asked me something about perspective or you know, what something the basics of it. He's like, just go and do it.
And what are your favorite mediums? Like, I just saw your exhibit, and I was just wondering, like, why do you have oil? Why do you have sculpture? Can you tell me about that?
Well, two things. It is important that I mention this regarding my background. Probably around the time that I was 10 years old, everybody that was invited to my birthday parties, they knew that I was interested in art, that I painted, and somebody gave me a Jansen book, which is a big deal. We're now in the 9th edition, and I still have that book in Spanish. And they gave me that book, and different than the other children of my time, my heroes were not sports people. My heroes were Michelangelo and Da Vinci. And then I got the book. So I got very interested into art history. And art history became, for me, something highly essential in becoming an artist. And the way that I paint is very much related to what we call the old masters, to those people from the 15th century, 16th century, when they were using panels, and they started doing real oil paint.
Real oil.
Yeah, real oil
Abstract.
paint for artists, yeah, which is very different than what we would call oil tempera, or we would call something else. It has to be grinded, it has to have the consistency like toothpaste, so to speak.
Oh.
So
And Mark, can you tell me about sculpture and painting? Like, what are your favorites?
I work with wood, and a a lot of the wood I find, sometimes I use pieces of trees or that I cut down into boards that I want to use. A lot of it is scavenged, like first class scavenged material that's from construction sites. It's cut-offs and it's an incredible amount of materials that are just thrown away, you know, like good sheets of plywood. And I use acrylics because I've tested them extensively. Some of my works, I leave them outside for years just to see what happens to them. The acrylic paint will outlive the substructures even. I mean, it'll outlive the wood and everything. I like acrylics, they dry fast. I've worked with oils too a lot, and I used to do oil paintings. I'd like light them on fire, you know, until they turn into like a gummy syrup, then extinguish them, then paint on it more. I did all kinds of things. I worked with all the media. I really like oil. I think oil is actually the best media for painters, painting within representationalism to abstract, if you have the studio space and the time.
Yeah.
So I like acrylics because I can get right to things, and I could dry them faster using like a heat and air, and then, you know, cut into it and build with it right away. I think the question is, you know, what, if anything, is the interplay between the sculptures and the paintings? To me, sculpture in a traditional sense was always representational, figurative, et cetera, work of that kind. That's what most people think of. They don't think, you know, they think of Michelangelo's David or whatever, not, you know, a piece of a tree that was cut and painted and reconfigured. But we're in a new age, you know, we have so many opportunities to work with various materials and so many different channels we can go down with making our art. The question is, you know, when you look at the work, if you have any kind of education at all, like beyond just, you know, general, you can say, oh, this person is doing something here. This isn't just decorative. It's some kind of a statement or something. It's its own entity. I consider my works to be like entities in their own right. They're not about anything. They are the actual thing. They're not representational in any way. They're not abstract. They're constructed objects with, I think, a good use of color and archival use of the materials. They're not going to fall apart. The titles sometimes tell about the work. I think titles can be poetic additions to a finished artwork, and it's funny and, you know, ironic. Like you'll find in much of Chicago art too, these quirky titles. But finally, you know, the work does have to stand on its own. Even though, if you see my show, I've got everything jammed in there like a madhouse. You know, that's how I actually prefer to show my work. It's time for, like for me and Moritz to show more in Chicago again. There's just only a few galleries that are open-minded enough to consider people who don't have who aren't famous. You know, they'll actually take a risk, and that's what we have to find.
Can you tell me, like, what represents the title of your show, like Future Primitives? And can you tell me what's the title of your exhibition?
One of my very good friends saw my work in my home, where I have like hundreds of paintings all over the place. And he saw my latest work, and he said I should call it Futurist Primitives. Like what the artist will be doing like 20, 30 years from now, perhaps in light of a collapse of modern society. But still retaining archival nature. So some of my paintings, I said, and some of the things I wrote, I did them like in the future, you know.
Okay.
And people are like, well, you can't say that. I'm like, what do you mean I can't say that? I'm saying that I did these in the future. These works were done in 2042 and 43.
Is there like a Japanese aspect of like behind the scenes, like the Burger King and like
No.
other?
The Burger King was named by one of my students, who is actually, she's Korean, and her name is Jung Jae. She's one of my favorite painters. She saw the painting and she said, she laughed. She thought it was funny. She said, it's Burger King, and she meant it had a crown. But then I looked up Burger King, because but really burger means shepherd, the name. Shepherd King, and it's sort of like a outgrowth of my faith too, things I study in Christianity, the Shepherd King. So I named it that. And it's a fun piece too. It's not like, too serious. It's kind of like for kids, perhaps even.
Oh, okay. And what is your favorite piece that like
In the whole show,
represents, yeah, like your statements?
the one piece that I did, it's called either, there's two. One is called Paintist Restrainist, because I was thinking like how to stop painting. I couldn't stop. And then the other one is called Unclear Weapons. And it's kind of a play on nuclear, but it's when Russia invaded Ukraine, and you know, I started to consider what this, how this could possibly develop.
Yeah.
So it's like an area that's surrounded.
Yeah, like my birthplace was Ukraine, like Kiev, like the central Ukraine.
Really?
Yeah, like both of my parents. So like I understand the social impact of
I've
getting
had
across.
several students from Ukraine recently, and their parents sent them here to get them out of there, you
Oh,
know. And
yeah.
they said, "What is your dad's in the military? Mom's a nurse. I don't even get
Yeah.
to hear from them at this time. It's like radio silence."
And Moritz, can you tell me more about your oils? Like you have like so many different color aspects of like your pieces.
Yeah, my work, my abstraction, it's more, it's related to art history. They're both interrelated. For me, they are periods of time, like the Renaissance, all the way to the 17th century with the Baroque and the Dutch masters, and those are the people that I admire. So in a way, I'm more traditional, and I make reference to some of their techniques and glazing, you know, this layering of thin layers of paint and the way it interacts. Oil interacts great with light. Then that's why you get the effect that you get in my paintings. So I like to make that reference, but I am in the present. See, you don't want to go back.
Associated with the past. the
Well,
future,
you
yeah.
can associate, you can be influenced, but you don't want to copy the past. You are a
Yes.
person of the present, and you can be and you can be influenced by it. And so for me, art history and painting are connected, are one, you know, they're very much connected. And I believe that any very good artist with a level of authenticity should understand and know a great deal about art history. And art history is very important to me. And
All history is. And I was going to say, we're running out of time, I think, but his work, to me, the reason we got connected in this too, we were in a faculty show at Oakton last fall. They were like windows looking either underwater, like in a deep sea sort of
Bubbles, the bubbles,
yeah, like search vessel, or on another planet, you know, where it was so cool. It was very refreshing to me to look at and inspiring. I wouldn't try to copy him, but I enjoy looking at his work very, very much.
And how long are you planning? How long were you teaching at Oakton, and how long is like your faculty, I guess, biography at Oakton College?
I've been there this is the beginning of my 34th year. I teach traditionally, you know, and I love it, you know, when I get, there's still young people that want to draw and paint like in a traditional sense, despite all this electronic media and everything. So I teach foundationally, and as they grasp that, they can go further and start experimenting and doing the things they want. But I'm not trying to turn anyone into a artist like myself, just like even my instructors. You mentioned the Japanese influence.
Yes.
Rei Yoshida and Michiko Tatani were two of my favorite instructors. There were some others, but those were my two favorite, and they happen to be Japanese, you know, and they had ideas about things being right. You know, you don't just like, well, you know, make this or that. Ray used to say things like, you know, he said like, what about your edges? You know, like, I'm like, what? He said, are you gonna like do the side of the painting? It was funny, but he
would say things like that
hilarious.
to me too. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for college students or teachers about, in general, like, you know, the future of technology?
I do. I don't think that is that it's realistic to think that the technology should disappear, that it's going to go away, that we should just kind of put it aside or anything like that. No, it should continue, but it should be used more moderate, especially in the arts,
And you have
to a minimum.
Yeah, you have to recognize the humanness of the art making is intuitive and it's
Yes,
natural.
yes.
I always want to say about Oakton, I started there actually, and my professors guided me well. It's
Yeah.
still a very excellent deal to go to Oakton Community College and take advantage of the facilities that are offered to you to their fullest extent. And it's more than worth, you'll get more than your money's worth.
Like you saw my paintings, and I'll give you an example, because I made those paintings that I make. When I start, they start one way, and I have no clue how they're going to end. And at the end, I usually go, oh wow, it ended up looking like this. I had no clue. But the most fascinating thing for me, which my great professor told me in Texas, not to become a cookie cutter. So in other words, if you were to say to me, I really like that painting of yours, and I like to buy it, and I say, well, I'm sorry, somebody else bought it. Oh, okay. Well, make me another one.
No.
I
So
could
much
not
more.
reproduce one of my own paintings. I could not duplicate it. And that makes me very happy. Very
Interesting.
happy.
Yes. You're very original, especially the two of you, like with your pieces. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diana.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Real People, Real Matters. This is Diana Tulchinsky with my guests, Moritz, Kellerman, and Mark Palmeri. Please watch us again.